Welcome to Mojo Talks. My name is Manny, and today we're talking about Infinity Wars and our theories that we have where the Marvel Universe will be going. I'm joined by Justin today. He is our resident comic book nerd. So, Justin, we both saw the Infinity War trailer.
That's right.
At this point, we've seen it, I think, a fair amount of times.
Many times.
Half of humanity will still exist.
Now, what is your first theory? Where do you think they're taking this movie?
That's a great question. On the grand scheme of things, ultimately, we have to keep in mind that this is the first of a two-parter, right? So whatever happens in this movie will ultimately be set up for the fourth Avengers movie, which used to be called Infinity War Part 2. Now it's currently unnamed. I'm sure soon after the release of the movie, we'll get some idea of what the next movie will be called. But I think that's key to keep in mind when we're talking about this movie, is that by the end of it, there'll probably be some sort of cliffhanger. There'll probably be something big that happens that leaves the audience wanting more just before we head out of the theater.
Now, for sure, none of us are expecting any cliffhangers at the end of this movie. That is for sure, because we know that Marvel is not keen on doing that at all.
Who the hell are you guys?
I want to get into talking about the Infinity Stones.
Right.
Now, we've seen most of them throughout all the 10 years that we've been watching this story unfold, but there's two that we haven't really seen yet. Right? So it is the Soul
Stone.
Soul Stone. I said two, but I mean one. The Soul Stone.
The Soul Stone, at this point, it seems like, is in Wakanda.
Yeah.
At the beginning of Black Panther, we get basically an explanation of where vibranium comes from and how Wakanda became this like futuristic society, basically. What we see is something crash land on Earth that gives birth to vibranium. It gives birth to the heart-shaped herb, which gives the Black Panther his powers. And it also allows the Black Panther to enter this kind of spiritual realm where he encounters his father, T'Chaka, early on in the movie. These are all elements that would probably be associated with the Soul Stone.
Okay.
So, and especially that in the trailer we do see this big battle in Wakanda. I think it's pretty safe to assume that that will be one of the reveals early on in the movie.
So do you think so if they go into Wakanda and Thanos retrieves the Soul Stone, now there's two more stones here that are based on pretty much on how a character works. They have the Eye of Agamotto, which is the time stone, right? The stone that's in Vision's head.
The Mind Stone, yeah.
The Mind Stone. So obviously, for him to get all the stones on his gauntlet to put this together, some of these guys are going to be phased out. What do you think? Do you think that... Now, I know the ongoing rumor is that Captain America is going to bite the bullet in this one. I believe we were talking before with our director, Phoebe. It's been well known that Chris Evans is done playing the character. He's pretty much like, hey, I want to move on. Takes up too much of his time, and he's more of an indie actor. But it kind of makes more sense that I think Vision's going to...
So the reason I don't think Vision is going to die in this movie is because, and keep in mind that before any of the trailers had released, I totally thought, oh yeah, Vision's a goner. But because they included the shot of one of Thanos' Black Order taking the Mind Stone out, or seemingly trying to take the Mind Stone out of his head, leads me to believe that that's a bit of a fake out, that's something that they're showing us early on.
Because we know that everybody in the Marvel Universe that dies doesn't really die.
Yes.
I mean, it's become a super annoying thing where everybody comes back, except for Quicksilver.
I think that in terms of Cap dying, which is the big rumor right now, it's entirely possible that he does, and he has a lot of people in the backfield waiting to take that spot, whether it's Falcon or the Winter Soldier, Anthony Mackie or Sebastian Stan.
You couldn't have done that earlier?
I hate you.
Both characters have taken up the mantle in the comics.
That brings me to my follow-up question.
Right.
Do you think with the popularity of Falcon's character in the MCU that they'll lean more towards Falcon taking over the Captain America mantle instead of Bucky like it was in the comics?
Well, both have spent time as Cap in the most recently.
Most recently was Falcon.
Well, it really depends on the direction that the people over at Marvel Studios think who can carry a franchise more. I think given the success of Black Panther and given the enthusiasm of the fans saying we want more Black or African American protagonists in these movies, I do think the case can be made that Anthony Mackie will take up the mantle and that Sebastian Stan could go on being the Winter Soldier or could potentially also be on his way out too in these movies. It's not...
Well, from what I read is that he signed his 6-contract deal with Marvel. Now, that usually, I don't know how is it 6 pictures fully that they're in it? Is it like, yeah, it's 3 movies and a bunch of cameos.
Right,
Are
he
you
shows
down?
up at the end of
Yeah.
Black Panther. Does that count?
Does that count? Exactly. Does that count in this deal? So moving on, is the new leader is that I want to talk about. Who do you think is going to be the new leader of the Avengers? Right now we've got Tony Stark.
Right.
When we did our Black Panther review, I was very keen on thinking that T'Challa will now be the new leader of the Avengers, like the unofficial
That's
leader.
interesting.
Because of his power, his diplomatic immunity, his way to get people together to fight these epic battles, especially that Infinity War, a huge chunk of the movie is going to take place in Wakanda.
Right.
So I think that Black Panther will become the unofficial new leader. So do you think is that a good direction for Marvel to go in, where they can kind of just bank on this character that's proven to be very good for them?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's an option. I also think that one candidate could potentially be Doctor Strange. In the history of Marvel Comics, he's always been a very prominent figure, but then again, so is Black Panther. I do think that
I feel like Doctor Strange, though, just to interrupt you, will become more of the Nick Fury character. Kind of the guy about, like, I'm just going to bring you guys some information
background
here.
kind
Yeah,
of
like,
thing?
hey, y'all, it's Doctor Strange. Listen up. This stuff's going down. Black Panther thinks you should rally the troops.
And it is in Black Panther's character to be a leader. He is the king of a nation. I'm sure managing a few superheroes wouldn't be that much trouble for him, considering all the other responsibilities that he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I do, however, I think we can both agree that Tony Stark's time as the leader of the Avengers is coming to a close.
Yeah, and they're kind of showing him that he's dealt with PTSD. His body's taking a beating at this point. I feel like he's at the end. And it's weird because we try to figure out where some of the other more popular Avengers fit into this universe too. Will it go on? Are we going to get more Thor movies? Are we going to revisit Asgard? Are we going to kind of concentrate more with Ant-Man and and Spider-Man? And that's another thing. We haven't seen Ant-Man in any of the Infinity War trailers.
Right, and the kind of curious release of Ant-Man and the Wasp, which comes out in between Infinity War 1 and Avengers 4, whatever it will be called, leads me to believe that movie will act as kind of like a prequel. I have a hard time believing that, like, in between these like gargantuan movies where Thanos is like this big
bad
force who's like potentially putting the entire universe at risk.
We have time to sit down
Yeah,
with
Ant-Man's gonna do a
Ant-Man
heist
gonna
in the
have a
middle of
little
that.
heist with the Wasp.
I have a hard time seeing that happen. And the MCU's been kind of wonky on their timeline. They don't really keep the releases don't represent the timeline of events in the movies. Guardians 2, for example, came out last year but takes place 4 years before Infinity War. So it's totally possible that Ant-Man is his absence might be explained in his movie, which takes place before the events of Infinity War.
And what do you think, now that we have Thanos, who's such a big bad guy, we know that he's somewhat of a kind of like a father figure to Gamora. Where is this going to take the Guardians universe? Where do you think, where is their next big bad lying? Besides that, the whole thing with Adam Warlock is coming around with the end credits scene that we saw. Do you find that having the Avengers fight Thanos kind of neuters the Guardians universe? Or is there enough meat there that they can kind of just go away and pull from it?
So what's cool about having the Guardians as part of the MCU, and we saw this with Guardians 1 where we actually got to see the Thanos that we see now, the Josh Brolin Thanos, because before that, when we see him at the tail end of Avengers 1, he wasn't yet cast as Josh Brolin yet.
And what's funny is that it looks nothing like the Thanos we see now. So
yeah,
you can
just a big purple guy.
Yeah, you can literally go back to that original end credit scene and be like, this ain't the same guy.
Right, exactly. And like the beauty of having the Guardians as our cosmic kind of tie-in is that whenever you're going to have these big bads of the Marvel Universe, they're probably not going to come from Earth. They're probably going to come from other places. Galactus is a great example of like a cosmic enemy that would pose a threat great enough for the Avengers to have to get together and take him on. And a great way to introduce all those cosmic characters, the Silver Surfer being one of them, Adam Warlock, of course, we're going to see eventually, is by having the Guardians as our baseline, our introduction to that entire side of the Marvel Universe. So their role going forward will be tying in all the stuff going on around what's happening on Earth into the fold when, Spider-Man has to take on whoever it is, whether it be Annihilus, who's another classic Guardians villain, or someone else, maybe Dormammu, who we saw in Doctor Strange. These great villains are going to come from elsewhere. They won't come from Earth, so that's important to have the Guardians there.
Yeah, and I like also how we implicate the Netflix shows with kind of that all these low-level street heroes are kind of dealing with everything that these big game heroes have done, right? So it's like we see the impact on the universe. They mentioned the Sokovia Accords in The Punisher. And on Jessica Jones, they mention a lot of weird like space conspiracies involving
they call it the
Kree.
incidents where it was basically Avengers 1 where New York was practically leveled by an alien invasion. There's a lot of like referencing back and forth between, but then again, they have kept the TV stuff very separate at this point.
Yeah, because they're very small and contrived stories, which is what makes me a bigger fan of the TV stuff. That it's more of a small character piece. It's like a 13-episode character piece where we're getting to know these characters and what's their day-to-day life like. Not like these little glimpses we get of Captain America being, I'm actually 90 years old and now I'm very, I don't understand anything.
Right. It's like bits and pieces of a character in short bursts versus on the Netflix shows, you spend a lot of time with these characters and you really get to know them.
Cool. I think these theories are more or less on the money. I'm pretty confident about what we have here. Thank you guys for joining us. And for more content like this, you can head on over to Mojo Talks, where you can like, comment, and subscribe, and send us your suggestions, see what you want us to discuss. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you around.